Hey guys, so right now I'm working on a video which requires a bit of editing, so I figured I would do a video which requires very little editing and no scripting at all really. This is actually an idea I've had for a while. It all started when I was eating some Mexican cuisine, so if you're wondering what, of course this is a tier list, it's actually a tier list of the best tortilla-based Mexican foodstuffs. It's a tier list I made. And as you can see, we've got our options down here. And I'm going to be ranking them and explaining my reasons for this. Now, you may think, well, why am I doing this? And it's because I actually think it's an area where can be a lot of healthy debate. Because the thing is, it all comes down to different preference. Like, when you break it down, a lot of these things, they're kind of very similar. And therefore, whether or not you like them completely comes down to your own individual priorities. And in my case, this is just my priorities and my reasoning. And I would like to see, if people comment below and tell me what they would do, what their tortilla-based Mexican foodstuffs tier list would look like, then that would be really good. And I hope you enjoy mine. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, but I figured seeing as it wouldn't require much effort, I would wait until the period where I was doing a video which I knew would take a while to come out. So anyway, we start off in the F tier, and I'm going to be starting off with, I've actually got them, that's a bit of a spoiler actually. So we start off with the enchiladas. Now, here's the thing. What is the big benefit of a tortilla? I think we all know what it is that you put something in a tortilla, you can fold it up, and then you can hold it in your hand. You can have an entire meal in something which you can hold in your hands. You can have meat or protein, you can have pulses, you can have vegetables, you can have spice, you can have sauce, you can have whatever else, carbs, things like rice in there, and you can have it all in your tortilla, and you can eat it in something you can hold in your hand. Now, what the people who came up with enchiladas said is, what if we made a tortilla? We made something, a burrito or a fajita, I guess, or something like that, and we made it, and then we put it in a pan, and we covered it in sauce and cheese, making it so, number one, you can't pick it up, because it's too soggy now, or you'll get stuff all over your hands. And then on top of that, it will now fall apart if you try and lift it up. So you don't even have the semblance of a tortilla there. Basically what you end up with is a saucy bread that's fallen apart, and the semblance of what once was nicely contained within a tortilla is now going to be, you've got to cut the tortilla up. You've got to put it on a plate with a knife and fork. You've got to cut it up. And honestly, I've got to be totally true, okay? I don't understand why anyone would have a tortilla like this. Because here's the thing. You might say, well, I like sauce. I really like a nice saucy tortilla. You can have the sauce within the enchilada. Something I don't have on here, which I could have on here, but I didn't think it was an official thing, is like chili con carne in a wrap. Like that was what first got me into Mexican food. I went to a party and they had chili con carne and tortillas and rice. And you had, a line of rice, a line of chili con carne, you fold it up, and it was just the most incredible thing. And it completely transformed my entire life. And what is distinct about that is they didn't fucking make the tortilla and then pour chili con carne over the top, thus making it impossible for me to eat. The chili con carne was in the tortilla, and it was very saucy. But, the tortilla was up to the task of holding the sauce in the thing. And here's the thing, even if you say, well, I don't think the tortilla is up to the task, surely it's worth actually giving the tortilla the chance to contain the sauce, rather than not even giving it the option by pouring the sauce onto the outside. So here's the thing, either have a tortilla where everything is within the tortilla, or just have any other carb apart from, a tortilla. Even a slice of bread would make more sense, because at least a slice of bread is like a slab or something which you can put over stuff. It sounds weird, but a slice of bread with some kind of, tomato sauce on top of it makes far more sense than a tortilla with tomato sauce all over it. But obviously the more logical things would be rice. Rice makes sense. Pasta. Pasta will obviously be getting a bit Italian, but here's the thing, at the end of the day, I'm not saying I dislike enchiladas. If somebody offered me an enchilada, I'd be like, thank you. I'm just saying they're completely pointless. Anyway, next we get, in E, we get soft-shelled tacos. So a soft-shelled taco, obviously you can have a tortilla in two different forms. You can have it be hard, which I think comes from frying it, but I don't know. Or you can have it be soft. Now, here's the thing about a soft-shell taco. It's basically just any other tortilla-based Mexican food stuff which somebody hasn't got around to folding up. It's basically just a lazy job. And like I say, the big benefit of having a tortilla, especially the big benefit of having a soft tortilla, is that you can fold it. You can fold it, have your food in there, and then your food isn't going to fall over the place. But instead, with this, somebody's just not folded it. And I don't understand why that decision would be made. I think it's a absolutely disastrous decision. And to be honest, if anyone ever gives me a soft shell tortilla, I just fold it up like a fajita anyway. And again, I'm not saying that a soft shell tortilla is not nice. What I'm saying is that it's lazy. What I'm saying is you've just given me any other tortilla-based dish, but you've not bothered to wrap it up. And you're without excuse because it's a soft shell tortilla, and therefore it should be able to be wrapped up. Now, coming in D tier, we have the hard-shelled tortilla. Now, here's the thing about the hard-shelled tortilla, and this is the thing I'll say to its credit. It definitely has a point. You say, well, you know what? I want a bit of crunch in my tortilla-based dish. Because a tortilla is very soft, the meat in it is very soft, the sauce in it is very soft, everything in it is very soft. I want a bit of crunch for the contrast. Some contrast crunch. But here's the thing, I understand your desire to crunch, but there's a problem with crunch. With crunch comes brittleness. And if you've got a big thing, a big purse thing, which is crunchy, it's also going to be brittle and it's going to break. So basically, whenever you are confronted with a hard-shelled tortilla, you've got two options. Either you eat from the top, and if you eat from the top, what's going to happen is those two doors, those two little flaps, they're going to get pushed together, and your tortilla is very likely to snap down the middle, or snap anywhere else. It's not going to snap where you want it to snap because it's so brittle, and you're dealing with the top, which is so far away from the more secure hinges of the tortilla. So this is when you might say, well, you eat at the bottom, okay? So if you eat at the bottom of the tortilla, then it is much more secure, and you're much more likely to reliably break it where you are biting. You break the tortilla where you're biting. But here's the thing, Kate, if you then pull away, you've now got a whole load of filling, which is completely unsupported by anything below it. Then you've got a problem. And you might say, well, hold the tortilla sideways maybe. But then everything's going to spill out the side. So you've got this complete disaster. The one solution you might say is, okay, well, you've got to bite the bottom and then bite the top. Now, that's probably your best bet. So, you eat your taco, your hard shell taco, you've got to go crunch, 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 crunch. And that's how you get through it. You do your bottom crunch and your top crunch. Then maybe you won't spill too much everywhere. But fundamentally, you have a whole load of problems. Like the whole thing becomes this massive operation, and I'm really not down with it. As far as I'm concerned, it's not good. And if you really want a crunch in your tortilla, again, I don't have this on here because it's not classic, but I've heard this thing. We don't have Taco Bell in the UK, but I've heard they have this thing called the Crunch Wrap Supreme. Now, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to guess that that's probably going to be a pretty good idea. I'm going to guess that's going to give you all the crunch, and based on the fact it's called a wrap, it probably has all of the crunch contained within a wrap form. And that's probably your best bet. If you want crunch in your tortilla-based meals, don't have a taco. Have some kind of crunchy wrap. Anyway, also coming up in D tier, we have nachos. Now, nachos, here's the thing. Everyone likes nachos. And to be honest, it would be very easy for me to point out the number one problem with nachos, which is that in theory, they sound really nice. In practice, they're almost always disappointing. They're almost always undersourced and things like that. But you might say, well, okay, I'm going to make my own nachos. Now, first of all, okay, that's a fair bit of effort. But the second thing is that the minute that you get nachos, you immediately have to begin deconstructing them. Because what you'll inevitably find is that the sauce distribution is way off. You're going to have loads of chips on the side, which hardly have any sauce, and loads of chips in the middle, which have so much sauce that they've now become soggy and saturated with flavor. So the nachos in the middle, they might as well, the chips in the middle, by the way, in the UK, fun fact, so you may know that in the UK we say crisps, where a lot of Americans would say chips. In general, when we're talking about tortillas or tortilla chips, we use the term chips because basically, I don't know, I guess it's because they're more like chips. I don't know, like the thing is, nobody in the UK would call like Doritos crisps, but I think we would be very willing to call them chips. Although that might just be that I'm a bit Americanized, because I am a bit Americanized, because Americanization is a thing that happens in Europe. So the chips in the middle of your nacho dish are now no longer serving the function of chips. The big thing you're looking for with this is you're looking for a crunch. But the chips in the middle aren't crunchy anymore because they're covered in sauce. And then the chips on the outside, well, they're crunchy, but also you've now got to kind of go through the process of getting some of the sauce from the middle and transferring it onto your outside chips. So you've got an equal distribution. And maybe if you painstakingly made sure that you had every single chip having equal coverage, you did each layer a new thing, things like that, then you might be all right. But ultimately, it's this huge operation. Again, like the eating of the taco is this huge operation, so too is the nacho. The construction of the nacho itself is a huge operation. And it kind of defeats the purpose of having, the nacho arrangement already set up. So I'm really not down with it. And to be honest, I almost feel like I should put it lower, but I'm going to keep it up there. Now, next we have chips and dip. Now, this is another reason why we might want to call Doritos chips, because it forms the nice little rhyming couplet. Chips and dip. Anyway, or chips and dips, if you want it to rhyme slightly better. Now, here's the thing, okay. What we have here in the picture, it doesn't look particularly nice, but in theory, chips and dips can be any kind of dip. You can have refried beans, you can have tomato dip, you can have guacamole, you can have some kind of meat sauce, you can have some kind of nacho cheese sauce, and then you can have all sorts of chips around the side. Now, here's the thing, okay. In this case, you do have to construct each chip. You have to, dip it into what you want and eat it. But what you don't have to do is reconstruct each chip. Basically, chips and dip, it's what you inevitably have to do if you're served nachos. If you're served nachos, you get these loads of undersauced nacho chips, and you have to scoop your nacho filling or your nacho topping onto your chips, because they're all in the middle, the sauce is all in the middle, your chips are all on the outside. But what I like about chips and dips is chips and dip says up front what it is. It's like you have to put your dip on these chips. These chips aren't dipped, so you've got to dip them yourselves. So it's just acknowledging what it is up front. It's a very honest relationship, and to be honest, for me, that's a big part of what makes food enjoyable, the honesty, and knowing that saying, hey, we're not going to pretend to you that we've perfectly accurately covered every single chip in guacamole, or that we've perfectly accurately covered every single chip in sour cream, whatever else. You've got to do that yourself. Now, here's the thing, okay, I know what people are going to say is the drawback. Hold a minute, though. This way, you can't really have all the different flavors on one chip, unless you're going to be completely cross-contaminating everything. And I can see the logic there, but I don't know exactly how much that is a drawback. I think it probably is. Like, the thing is, you might ask the question, well, is it really a problem if your whole intention is to have all the different flavors together? Does it really matter if you cross-contaminate? Does it matter if you dip into the sauce, then you dip into the guacamole, then you dip into the sour cream, then you put it in your mouth? Well, if you want to eat it all together anyway, it doesn't really matter. Of course, getting every single different sauce on the chip would be a nightmare, but then, if you're going to talk about the nightmare of getting equal distributions of sauce on things, you can't really defend nachos. So as far as I'm concerned, they're just really good. Now, well, not great, obviously, they're in C, but I think chips and dip, everyone says, oh, nachos, love nachos. Chips and dip are better, because it makes, it's honest about what it is, it's honest about what you need to do, it's honest about what you need to bring into the relationship, and at the end of the day, it ends up tasting quite nice. And also, I guess I could add, it's more like kind of easy to graze. If I'm having, like, people say, oh, nachos, you have nachos if it's game night. Now, games, I know that in America they watch lots of shitty games that last for 10 billion years because it's got loads of adverts. Everyone knows a real game is 90 minutes plus half time, and then maybe it goes into extra time and penalties. But the thing is, that's long. That's like 2 hours. So at the end of the day, like, the idea that nachos are what you're going to eat during game night, it makes no sense, because nachos, the middle's going soggy, the sauce is all just, clumped everything together. At the end of the day, I don't think it takes very long to eat nachos, but I do think eating chips, you can really make your way slowly throughout. You can have a dip, eat, kind of, enjoy that moment, and then return back to it. I feel like with nachos, it's a much more, it's kind of a much more of a gorging thing. Nachos, you gorge yourself on nachos. You pick up big handfuls of nacho chips. If you're having chips and dip, you just get one dip. It's one chip. Dip it. Maybe dip it again. Bit more. The only other thing I can see people bring up chips and dips, they might say, oh, double dippers. Here's the thing. I don't think people double dip Doritos. And if they do, they need to sort themselves out. And also, to be honest, I would say, any meal is made better when you don't have friends. So just a point to bear in mind. Now, for this one, as we get into the B, the A, and the S, and in B, we have quesadillas. Now, here's the thing about quesadillas. They're basically just soft-shelled nachos. Oh, sorry, soft-shelled tacos, but they make way more sense. Because it's like, the big benefit, I didn't actually bring this up. Oh, I should have brought this up. But basically, one of the things I was going to bring up about soft-shelled tacos is people might say, oh, you can fit more food in them because, you know, you're not folding them over too much. So you can, but the thing is, and what I was going to say is you can't actually because they're going to fall out. Now, with a quesadilla, you actually can fit quite a bit in them because it doesn't fall out because it's all kind of held in there. Now, the drawback with a quesadilla, I think, is that they have to be quite thin, which I think kind of, it makes it feel a bit tortilla-y, like a bit too tortilla-y. But, and I think the other thing is they almost always rely on a lot of cheese, which is like fine, but I always kind of view cheese as like an accompaniment in my tortilla-based Mexican food rather than the main event. However, the big benefit for me of a tortilla is it's something you can hold with one hand. It's something you don't have to agonize it too much over how you're going to eat it. And, you know, it's definitely a unique experience. It's a lot like a calzone, and I really like it. I guess the other thing I should mention about quesadillas is that you can fill it with all sorts of stuff. Like a lot of the time people have quesadillas that aren't especially Mexican, but yeah, we're assuming you're going to fill it with Mexican stuff. And again, I do kind of wonder how thick a tortilla could get, a quesadilla could get before it would cease to really function as a quesadilla. I think I would generally prefer my quesadillas to be quite thick. I prefer more topping and less bread because I'm a normal human being. One of the main things that motivates me is that I find bread to be a very annoying thing because it's so salty and so unhealthy for you. Like, I don't mean it tastes healthy. Oh, sorry, that it tastes salty. I just mean that you're eating it and you know that it has loads of salt. Like the tortillas that we have at our house are 8%. One tortilla is 8% of your daily recommended salt. And you might say that's not enough, that's not much. But like, I used to have like 3 tortillas in a fajita because I used to not fill the fajitas up very much. And when you think about it, that's what, at 24%, that's a quarter of your daily salt just on the bread. Which to me is kind of ridiculous. So my general, if I'm going to eat like something that's really salty, I want it to taste really good. And I don't think bread tastes good enough to justify how salty it is. So generally speaking, I want to not eat too much bread. Which is kind of going to give away the next thing, because the next 2 things we have, these 5, they're going to come into play later. You may also notice that these 5 have worse photography. I'll explain that in a minute. But we have burrito and fajitas. Now, basically, I'm not going to do too much of a build-up. I think these 2 are very similar, but for a variety of reasons, I think a burrito is worse than a fajita. Now, here's why, okay. 2 reasons. Number 1, everything is kept in a burrito. And I think stereotypically burritos are kind of cooked after the fact. I think the main benefit to this might be that you'll like it if you like crunchy food. But I think also that's seriously going to impair the kind of color and texture contrast that you get because of, the alternative is you put everything in fresh. You put your lettuce in fresh, you put your guacamole in fresh, you put your cheese in fresh, you put your sour cream in fresh. If you're going to cook a burrito, then you're either limited in what you can put in, or what you put in isn't going to taste as, vibrant as if you hadn't just put it in the oven. That's reason number 1. And reason number 2, I guess I'll put fajitas up here anyway, because, everything I'm saying about burritos applies to fajitas in reverse. But then the other thing about burritos is that because you fold them twice, that's more bread involved, because you can't have, if you look at that fajita, you've got filling spilling out the ends. And what you can do with a fajita is you can pick it up, and that filling, which is spilling out the ends, it doesn't have to spill out the ends because it's going into, gravity is holding into the fajita. So here's the thing, your first few bites of a fajita are a joyous occasion because you just get these mouthfuls of just filling, flavor, just mouthfuls of flavor. All that's going in your mouth in your first bite. Your first bite of a burrito is of, assuming it hasn't been cut in half. If you've got just a burrito that's not been cut in half, your first bite is of a very bready, just going to be a very bready bite because it's been folded over on both ends. So you just got, twice as much bread because the bread has been folded over. And that's really it. Why would you, if someone said, hey, what do you want? This delicious, lovely, vibrant filling or some bread? you got to choose the delicious, vibrant filling, and you're going to get more of that with the fajita. And it's actually healthier for you, because the bread is like the least healthy part of this whole thing. Despite being the least flavorful, the bread is also the least healthy. And then I think finally, obviously, fajita, you can put in all sorts of stuff and it's going to kind of it's going to stay vibrant, which I already kind of said. So, again, the reverse for the burrito. So you can put your salad in, you can put fresh herbs, and you can put whatever you want in, and it's going to reach there. So fajitas, they're fantastic. Now, I'm going to go down a bit again and look at these things. Now, I'll explain why these have worse quality. So basically, I was looking up food that is based on, tortilla. I actually found a Wikipedia page. It's list of tortilla-based dishes, and I was like, "Ooh, that sounds useful." So I went on it and I looked at some of them, and some of them were things that I'd never had before. A lot of them were things I've heard of, but I've never had before. So what I did is I kind of looked at what they are describing, and I thought, what do I think of that? And basically, this is what I think of them. So you'll enjoy this. We have in our F slot, chimichangas, and in our E slot, taquitos. Now, what are chimichangas and taquitos? Well, ironically, chimichangas are burritos, basically, and taquitos are fajitas. But what distinguishes them from burritos and fajitas is that they've been deep fried. In other words, they're basically just greasy versions of these nice meals. So, I mean, I don't know who it is who likes grease. Like, I don't know. Like, if there was one flavor I can think of that just is bizarre to me, that like people actually enjoy it, it would be like grease. There'd be like, they're like, oh, I love that. It sounds like, that's going to taste really greasy. And you think, what? That's not a good thing. That's not like a tasty thing. Why are you talking about how greasy something is as if it's good? So yeah, burritos. The reason why chimichangas, which are the burrito ones, are lower down is because they're going to be more bready, so that's more bread to soak up more grease, so to make a more unpleasant experience. I don't know why grease is something that people enjoy eating. I mean, the thing is, like, there are some instances where I do like a bit of oil, like in salad dressing, some pasta sauces. I guess maybe English breakfast. I mean, again, like, I wouldn't say grease is something I like about English breakfast. I would say it's kind of just a necessary consequence of having an English breakfast. But yeah, I don't understand going out of your way to deep fry things. And yeah, chimichangas, yeah, like I said, I've never had them, but I've had deep fried things before. I think the closest example I can think of is one time I had a deep fried samosas. Samosas are a Indian meal, which is made from kind of like a pastry, but it seems very similar. And basically you deep fry them, and basically the grease got up in the samosas and the grease was penetrating the pastry, and it just wasn't pleasant at all. And that's exactly what I imagine a chimichanga and a taquito would taste like. Now, next in number D, we have the alambre. Now, an alambre is, oh, by the way, sorry if I'm pronouncing any of these incorrectly. So the alambre, as you can see, is basically just a cluster of filling and then some tortillas to the side. Now, I can already hear what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, hold on a minute, Michael, isn't this just like a soft-shelled taco? You just put your filling in and then you fold it over and then you eat it. And I think, like, in a way, that's probably how it's intended to be eaten. But what I like about it is it's kind of just like a do-it-yourself thing, where it's like you get this, meal and you put the bread in. And I think so you might say, well, hold on, okay, if you like that, then why is it kind of down here with the hard-shelled taco and the nachos, which you were kind of railing against? Well, I think the thing is, ultimately, it's really only good in that it's not really doing anything. Like, basically what I'm reviewing here right now is filling with a tortilla next to it, which is only good insofar as it's not anything explicitly bad. Like, if they did something stupid with this, then I would say that's bad. And if they did something good with it, I would say it was good. But ultimately, all they've done is said, here's some tortilla and here's some filling. Do the rest. And, that's fine. I mean, I would rather somebody serve me that than an enchilada. because I'd be like, oh, thank you. And then you might say, well, hold on a minute, surely a taco would be good because you could just fold it over. At the end of the day, the thing is, if you serve me a taco, it's more insulting to me. Sorry, a soft shell taco, because it's like you've pretended you've put some effort in. You've gone, hey, I went to the effort of putting your filling in a tortilla and didn't go to the effort of wrapping it up, which is more offensive than if you just handed me the tortilla and the filling and said, do what you want with it. Because at least then you're not acting as if, what you've served me is close to a completed product. That is not a completed product. That is something you haven't wrapped up all the way. This, you're giving me the option to wrap it up all the way myself. So there we go, D tier. Now finally we have the Chilaquiles. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's the one I'm least confident in how to pronounce. And a Chilaquiles, basically, it's very hard to tell from this photo, but it's pretty much just nachos, but with soft bread. Now, right, so what do I like about that? And the answer is, I think basically it just works so well in my mind. The idea of having like your filling and then you've got these soft bits of bread because it gives you dexterity. It means you can kind of pick it up. It means you can scoop it into your mouth. It just, I like that idea. And yeah, that's really it. I mean, it just sounds good. I mean, maybe, you know what, actually, okay, I'm going to change my mind after that. I'm going to put it with the dip because it is very similar to the dip, actually. I'm not being, true to myself if I don't otherwise. So yeah, I should have put it there. And there it is. It's, so basically it's just, chips and dip, but the chips are soft and I'm kind of okay with that. I think the obvious criticism, and the criticism it might be fair to make, is you might say, well, the whole benefit of chips and dip is you get that crunch. If you're going to have something that's soft, why don't you just have a fajita or a burrito or a quesadilla? At the end of the day, that's a fair criticism, but I think I kind of just like the idea of it. I think I like the grazing potential of it, so just pick up a bit, squeeze it in, eat it. So yeah, good. And then finally we have these, which are called chalupas, and they are going to go in the number A slot. So as far as I can tell, chalupas are the closest thing here to tortilla pizzas. So tortilla pizzas are basically what you make if you have some tortillas to use up and you don't really know what to use them. In particular, for me, a tortilla pizza was always a go-to thing if we had frozen tortillas, because sometimes, you'd use tortillas, you wouldn't end up using them up, and you were worried that they would go stale. Also, actually, to be honest, if you had stale tortillas, basically, if you had tortillas which are no longer at a point where they could be rolled up because they were too stale, or because they'd been frozen and, they weren't going to kind of thaw properly, then you would make a tortilla pizza. And it's just such an easy thing because you don't need to roll it. And also you end up with lots of nice topping on top. And that seems to be what a chalupa is. So there were several things which all kind of look like that, but I'm giving this the title of basically authentic Mexican tortilla pizza. There were all sorts of different other things on the list of tortilla-based things, but they were all kind of more of the same, but with slight variations. Like some of it was literally just which area it was from. So these are the main things. So let's just go through and do a final kind of tally. So we have in F tier enchiladas, which, are pointless because they're covered in sauce. And why would you do that? The whole point of a tortilla is that you're supposed to have to hold it. We have chimichangas, which are, greasy, sound really unpleasant. And, there's just more bread for the grease to soak into. We have soft tacos, which are just any other kind of tortilla-based thing that somebody hasn't bothered to roll up all the way. And then we have taquitos, which I'm only giving a slightly higher rating than chimichangas because they're not as folded up. So at least you have more filling to take off the greasiness. And then we have hard shell tacos, which I like the idea, but I think they're going to be, they're always difficult to eat. We have nachos, which I like the idea, but at the same time, you've always got that sauce distribution problem. You've got a whole load of problems. And then we also have this thing, which I've forgotten the name of, which I think was called Alhambras, something like that, which is only good insofar as it's not really trying to do anything. So you just say, well, at least I haven't done anything explicitly bad. In C tier, we have chips and dip, which, like I say, it's just an easy combination. Do it yourself. And then we have this, which is the soft. I've forgotten what this is called again, but it's something like chilaquila, or is that the other way around? I don't know, like chilaquiles. I think it's chilaquiles. Anyway, which is basically nachos, but it's soft, and I like that dexterity. I think that dexterity is going to help you out a bit, and that's the main benefit for it, the dexterity of having it be served with tortillas, so you can kind of grab it. And then we have these quesadillas, which are good because you can one-hand them. They're not difficult to eat. The only thing I don't like about them is I think it kind of limits how much filling you can have in them. Then we have burritos. Again, really in A tier, we have burritos, which are very good. I mean, I like the idea. I like the fact it's all in one thing. I like the fact that you can have loads of filling in there. The one thing I don't like about it is that you're going to have more bread than you need to. And then we have not French bread, and definitely not French bread. We're going to have tortilla pizzas. Basically, again, they're called chalupas, and I know people are going to say the chalupas are not defined as tortilla pizzas. I'm sure they're not. Anyway, but basically, I'm going to call them tortilla pizzas. So basically, tortillas laid out flat with filling on top. What I like about these is that they're easy. You can make them. You don't need your tortillas to be perfectly flexible to make them. There's lots of benefits for them. Practically speaking, you can have a fair bit of filling on them. You can have more filling than I think you can have with a quesadilla. The only thing about them is that ultimately I think you still have some problems with eating them. It's not going to be quite as easy to one hand, for example. And I guess if I were being quite, cynical, I would point out that actually if you're going to eat them one-handed, you'd probably just end up folding them over and making them into a quesadilla anyway. But if you put enough filling on them and you cut them thin enough, then, I'm sure there's other ways you can eat them. So there you go. And then, of course, in S tier, we have fajitas. They are just so good because it's the minimal amount of bread necessary to get the maximum amount of filling. They are easy to one hand, and all of the filling is in there. It could be bursting at the seams, and your filling is still not very likely to fall out. So there we go. That is my tier list of the Mexican cuisine. And please leave in the comments any mistakes you think I've made, and hopefully I feel like I managed to talk about this for so long. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye. Thank you to my current patrons: Hannah Taylor, LRX89, Stephen, Kirsten, Nancy Diamond, Stephen Lester, Rosemary Furman, and Eric Hernandez. You're all very appreciated.